A little bit of noise here at the top. Great. So we're going to continue this afternoon. We have an amazing series of entrepreneurship and leadership talks from a dynamic and powerful group of founders who are disrupting the world around them. Up first, we have, we'll welcome to the stage an entrepreneur, a lawyer, an LGBT activist, and she happens to lead a wellness brand that promotes intimacy and empowers women to experience pleasure more often. So I appreciate her. Please welcome to the stage Melanie Crystal, founder and CEO of Laurels.
I am so excited to talk here today with you about one of my absolutely favorite topics, creating chemistry with factories to make awesome products. So, a lot of people say that starting a company is like having a baby. And you bring it to life, you nurture it, you let it grow. Well, when that happens, there needs to not just be you, there needs to be some form of chemistry. So whether that is sexual chemistry or romantic chemistry or in vitro fertilization or chemistry with an adoption agency, you basically can't be making this baby entirely on your own. And so if you are creating a product, you can't be creating that product only by yourself. You need somebody else to help you make that baby, and it's going to be a factory. And the process of finding that factory is a lot like dating. So my name is Melanie Crystal. I'm the founder and CEO of Laurels, and my baby is oral sex panties. So how in the world did that become my baby, you might ask? So I was a lawyer for several years doing consumer products and healthcare law. I enjoyed it, but I wasn't super passionate about it. Meanwhile, I was also a dental dam user, and I thought that the product had some potential, but when you wear it, I hate it that it moved around on the body. I hate it that you had to hold it in place. I wished it were just a sexier product in general that didn't feel like a scarlet letter. And so my aha moment happened when I was on a very romantic vacation that actually happened to be my honeymoon with a person who may or may not any longer be my wife. But in any case, we were on our honeymoon and we found ourselves needing a dental dam. And we didn't have one. You couldn't find them. And, how sad was it? Here we were on our honeymoon and we couldn't have oral sex. I mean, how sad was that? So I started thinking about it and I was like, why isn't the dental dam sexier? Why isn't it something that's actually attractive and beautiful enough that people would want to buy it? Something that enhances the intimate experience rather than detracting from it. And so I decided to start trying to create that product, and I came up with this. This is one of the very first prototypes of Laurels. Clearly at that point I realized I cannot do it on my own. I need a baby maker. I need a factory. So you need a manufacturer. Where in the world do you start? The initial process is kind of like dating. First, you need to gather your options, like being on every single swiping app that there is. So maybe you're super lucky and you're an engineer, or you were part of a startup accelerator, or you already have another connection to a factory in some way. That's amazing and really wonderful for you, although you still need to be very careful to vet that factory and make sure that it works for your needs. But if you're totally starting from scratch, I would recommend that the best place to go is Alibaba. So Alibaba is an amazing website that has just an innumerable amount of products available, either to purchase that are, ready to ship, or things that can be customized in certain ways. And so what I would recommend doing is going on Alibaba and looking for anything that's remotely like your product. So for example, for Laurels, we found these latex panties. They unfortunately were $28 a piece, which is going to be way too much. They weren't able to make them thin enough, but at least we found one potential manufacturer there. Another thing that we looked at were existing dental dams and how thin than those existing dental dams could be. So, that again gave us another item to add to the list. And you're just going to continue to add to your list any potential items that are similar to your product. Another way that you can find potential manufacturers is through the website Panjiva. So this website tracks imports and exports. And what you could do is go on to the website, look for your competitors, look for products that are named in similar ways to what your product is going to be. And what you'll be able to do is find who is exporting that item to you. To those other companies. And that will continue to add additional items to your list. And then also, going to industry conferences is amazing. Obviously, everyone in this room is really wonderful at that because we're all here at Lesbians Who Tech. But for your product, you're going to want to go to a variety of conferences that are related to what you're doing. So for Laurels, we could go to rubber-related conferences. We can go to lingerie conferences, medical devices conferences, sexual health conferences. So we ended up going to several of those conferences, and medical device conferences were in particular very helpful for us. What I would recommend is just going in there full of curiosity and go up to as many booths as possible, asking them about what they do, talking a little bit about what you do, and you're likely to find some really good connections through that. Maybe not directly to a manufacturer, but to somebody who knows manufacturers. This was incredibly helpful for us. We found a ton of information and ended up getting connected to several different factories this way. So the next step is messaging. Once you have a list of about 20 or 25 factories, reach out to them. I would recommend via email. And you're going to want, I'm going to skip through a little bit of this, but you're going to want to adjust your email over time, figuring out, what works and what doesn't, until you get an email that leads you to a yes. So then, after you have that list of 20 or 25 narrowed down to the ones who seem interested from your email contact, now it's time to meet. And I would so highly recommend that that meeting happen in person. So you really need to take advantage of the fact that you can meet with someone, have a conversation with them, get to know who they are as a person, see their factory, learn about the other companies that they work with, learn about who their family is, what drives each of the owners and the workers to come to their job each day. And that kind of personal connection will make so much of a difference when you are later on trying to get in line along with the other companies that your factory works for. You want them to really know you, to trust you, and to like you, and having that in-person connection is really the way to do that. So here are some things that you're going to want to think about when you're meeting with your factory and narrowing it down to just a few. First of all, the time zone. You need to know that you are going to be working factory hours if you are manufacturing a physical product. So my factory in Malaysia opens at 6:30 Pacific time, so that's the time, my time in LA, and I'm often interacting with them until midnight or 1 a.m. It's just the reality of the day-to-day of putting together a product and then getting it out to market. If you really want to have a product that you can interact with during regular day hours, I would recommend either manufacturing in the US or maybe Europe might make sense for you. But just know that for a long time, their factory hours are going to be your hours as well. Then also language is an important thing to think about. How can you communicate effectively? Now, often in the initial conversations, you might be able to have a translator. I was able to get a translator through our local Small Business Development Coalition. But once you start talking about the minutia of everyday manufacturing, like exactly what color that stamp is and exactly where that cut happens, it's incredibly difficult to do that if you're doing it over Google Translate. So Malaysia, for example, which is where I ended up manufacturing, made a lot of sense for us because because in Malaysia they speak English. And then you compare that to a place like Thailand, which also manufactures a lot of latex products, but they don't really speak English in Thailand. So that was something to think about. Another thing to think about is distance. Anytime you ship a sample, if you are shipping it overseas, it's going to take a few more days or longer to get your sample, and it can take a bit of time to iterate. Another thing is culture. Can you be who you are? Can you be out? Are they going to respect you as a female entrepreneur, as an LGBTQ entrepreneur? That's definitely something to think about, because this is going to be a long-term relationship. You want to feel comfortable with who you are being around this entity. Then also expertise. Will they make a great product for you? It turns out that in the United States, there was not as much latex product experience as there was in Malaysia and in Thailand. And so while trying to work with them for a little while, I was getting samples that just weren't quite up to par. And so you could go for that in order to work with a factory that, meets these other criteria for you, but it's going to take longer to get to a finished product. And then finally, enthusiasm. Are they excited to be making this product for you? A lot of factories out there have so many other clients already. For latex factories, they're making hundreds of millions of condoms and gloves per year, and that business is thriving. So do they really want to add on this project that could be really risky for them? Really, what you have to either convince them of is that there is a lot of potential money in this, and that you will be great to work with, or it might not be the right factory for you. And then finally, expense. That's another thing to think about. And it's not just the unit costs and the quantity breaks. You also need to think about the cost of research and development, which is a lot less expensive overseas than it is in the United States. You also have to think of the cost of tooling, also less expensive overseas. You need to think about samples, the packaging costs, and then the shipping costs. And if you're shipping your product from overseas, you have to think about freight forwarding, tariffs, and customs. So after you've thought about all of these things and narrowed things down, after you've met, I recommend that you get samples from 2 to 3 factories. It's worth paying the extra money there to really figure out who is easy to work with and who gets you a great product, and then also how expensive it is. Then choose your favorite, and then I also recommend having a backup factory, although it's a delicate balance to figure out how much information you want to be giving your backup factory. And then keep visiting and stay a while when you visit. I recommend a week, maybe a couple of weeks. You will learn so much from the way that the factory works, to getting things going as efficiently as possible, to all of the information that you need to know when you're having your WhatsApp calls down the line. And then finally, above all, be good to each other. You have a relationship with this factory. You care about them, they care about you, and your goals are aligned to make an amazing product. Continue to treat them well. So let's please stay in touch. Please feel free to reach out to me. We are hiring and we're fundraising, so also feel free to connect with me about that. I'm available at melanie@mylaurels.com. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that. Thank you for offering a roadmap. We don't get that type of granular detail around manufacturing enough, here at Lesbians Who Tech, so that's fantastic. Up next, another amazing speaker. She has been recognized as a top woman in tech by Fast Company, by an influencer in Campaigns and Elections magazine. She's also been recognized as a tech person to follow from Black Enterprise and Huffington Post. She's done a lot. She is an entrepreneur. She is a business person, writer, and leader to watch. Please welcome to the stage Cheryl Conti, CEO of Do Big Things.
Long ago, and I want to give a special shout out to Leanne Pittsburgh for inviting me back. Yes, I heard you. She deserves the whistles. You know, back then it was like very avant-garde and experimental. Like, will anyone even show up? Like, what's going to happen? And, you know, today to be here in this incredible celebration of diversity and inclusion and innovation, so exciting. So, without that, I'm going to talk to you about my tech startup, Attentively. So, Attentively is the first tech startup with a Black female founder, myself, to be acquired by a NASDAQ company. Yeah, that happened. Yeah, thank you. It's kind of you. That happened in 2016. I actually had, we sold Attentively in July 2016, and I actually had my baby, Colm, who's now 3, in August of 2016. I like to joke that he's my new startup. I don't have an exit strategy yet for that, and it seems like there's like a 20-year runway at least. Yeah, so if anybody's got any tips, you know, let me know. But Attentively was all about very innovative product development for causes and campaigns. So social listening, marketing automation, and influencer engagement for nonprofits. So here's our team. Small, ninja-like. You might notice something interesting, not necessarily your usual brosif kind of crew, right? We were female-led. Our CTO was a woman, and you know, one of the things that we really wanted to show was that you can invest in women and something good is going to come out of it. We had some brave men. Even though we were small, we were very high profile in our space of progressive startups. And so we had a number of awards. We had a lot of articles written about us. But what had happened was, okay. Yes, so above are the plans. And, you know, in our space of, you know, progressive, you know, techies, we saw a lot of our peers launching startups. You know, they saw a gap, you know, technology that didn't exist that causes and campaigns needed. And looking back, a lot of those people were straight white dudes. We just knew them as our friends. We just didn't really, you know, bliss sometimes is ignorance, right? Or ignorance is bliss. But even for a straight white guy, startups are hard, okay? That you know, there's a lot of books that have been written. So, you know, you have to be very creative and very resourceful when you have a startup. And you have got to be willing, you know, to do some things and swim across some random lakes, for example. You see that little lake? That definitely happened to me, absolutely. So I'm gonna share with you some of the strategies that I learned. And that's really why I wrote the book, Mechanical Bull, How You Can Achieve Startup Success. It's new, it just came out in May. It's now an Amazon bestseller, so you can find it there. Mechanical Bull, the book. You can buy Mechanical Bulls, actual bulls on Amazon, but this is different. It's a book. It's not that. So I have 5 strategies for you, okay? And I'll go through them pretty quickly. And there's much, much more in the book. I really wanted to distill everything I learned because it's not easy. And, you know, while we were pioneers, I want to see so many more, thousands, millions more startups come behind us. So first off, there is a life cycle. And I think a lot of people don't realize that going in, that there's likely to be, if you're successful, if you're doing well, there's going to be a 5 to 7 year trajectory, right? And so you need to plan accordingly. Starting with, are you even an entrepreneur? Sure, it sounds glamorous, right? Like, oh, you know, I'll be my own boss and I'll work from home in my pajamas. Okay, so here's the real 411, folks, all right? Imagine not just having one boss, but having thousands, maybe millions of bosses. Yeah, those are your clients and customers. Right? Does that sound appealing? And the reason you're working from home is because you can't afford an office. And the reason you're still in your pajamas is because you don't have time to put on pants because you're working so hard. So is that still you? Like, is launching a startup still appealing? Good. Okay. Then there's so much more to know about all of the different things that you'll go through, you know, including, you know, figuring out your idea, your team, you know, getting that first funding in from an investor, hopefully more than one, and then, you know, figuring out how to manage your burn, pivoting, learning from your challenges, scaling if you're lucky, and then exit, which can look, more on exiting in a second. Number 2 strategy, ride or die or keep trying. Look, you are going to learn the good, the bad, and the ugly about your co-founders. My co-founder in our business, Rosalind Lemieux, and I, we know more about each other than our own mothers, okay? And you will have to decide really quickly if this is someone you can keep riding with, or if you need to drop them off on the next saloon, okay? No, I'm being absolutely serious. You know, especially in that first year, you know, it's a critical time. Most American small businesses fail in their first year, 90%. And of those, 90% fail within 3 years. And so you're going to have to decide quickly whether or not, you know, you're doing more fighting with your colleagues, your co-founders, than you are actually building revenue and your reputation. Number 3, it's different when you look different. You know, the person on the right's experience is actually going to look different still than the person on the left. And while that is a bummer still, okay, the good news is knowing that, okay, really fully understanding that in a way we didn't. Okay, knowing that it's going to be different for you because you might look different. You are a, quote, non-traditional entrepreneur, which means you are anything other than a straight white male, okay? Your experience is going to be different, and therefore knowing that it's going to be different can help you build resources and ask for help at the critical moments that you need it. Number 4, life comes at you fast. The minute someone cuts you a check for funding for your business, the clock is ticking down, and you are burning cash every minute. So every minute you don't make a decision, there is an opportunity untaken, there is cash burned, you might have to lay someone off, right? You might impact, or you may not be able to invest in that new engineer. So if I would do anything differently, it would be making decisions even faster than we did. Take in as much information as you can, listen to your gut instinct, you know, your hunches, your instinct. Neuroscience tells us that that is actually the result of literally millions of calculations in your brain. And your brain cranks it through a black box, and out comes, the result is just a feeling. Listen to that feeling, okay? That is really important information. And then just decide, okay? And then give it 2 months, see the results of your decision, reevaluate, and make a new decision. Every day that you don't decide is a day that you are losing your momentum. Finally, last strategy for success, the power of a network. I would not have been able to build my businesses without the community in which I exist in politics and technology, and I damn sure wouldn't have been able to keep them. Especially for you young cats out there, you have so much power within all of the connections on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Those so-called weak ties can be your greatest strength. And the more you create that community around you and be a good community member, try to be helpful, try to provide resources yourself, you will find that that comes back to you 10 to 100 times over. I am living proof of that. So, we need more help for startups out there. It's not easy out there. The hustle is real, as many of you know. How many of you have startups? Yeah, so you know the struggle is really real out there. So here's what I'm doing as a result of this experience with my old friend Van Jones of CNN and Amy Henderson. I co-founded Yes We Code, which is all about helping over 100,000 low opportunity youth to become high quality coders. And yes, thank you. Because our jobs are dope, right? More people should know that. So that's why we founded Yes We Code. And I wrote this book, Mechanical Bull, How You Can Achieve Startup Success. Did I mention that it's an Amazon #1 bestseller in some categories? Did I mention that? Did I mention it's on Amazon and you can buy it at any time? You could buy it right now. No, and it's really cheap, actually. We set the price low enough to make sure that it's accessible to as many people as possible. Many people have asked me, Cheryl, you seem like a very busy single mama CEO. How on earth did you have time to write a whole book? I work with Scribe Media, and I would just want to give them a shout out. They were amazing. I think that more lesbians who tech should write books. Okay? Yeah, bitches. So get out there. Go find Scribe. Just a quick mention. Often people ask, what are you doing now? So I have a new startup. It's called Do Big Things, and it's inspired by this amazing quote from President Barack Obama. Do you remember him? He used to be president. I know it seems like a really long time ago, but one of the things that he said was, we can win the future. We do big things. And so Do Big Things is all about creating new narrative and new tech in the form of a digital agency that works with causes and campaigns. We are proudly women-led. Our executive team is 70% women. We are 50% people of color, which, as you know, for a tech company is pretty unusual, particularly in our space. We work with presidential campaigns. We are working with some of the highest profile Senate campaigns, including one taking on the most powerful man in the Senate today. We work with folks like Everytown for Gun Safety, Friends of the Earth, NAACP, you name the issue, and we are there. We also have some proud LGBTQ staff, by the way. This is my co-founder of Attentively, Roz Lemieux, rocking that mechanical bull. Thank God my time on a mechanical bull was not actually, shown. There's no video, thank God. I fell off immediately. Look, I'm going to close by saying more people have been to the moon than have done what I have done. Okay, and there is more power in the cell phone you have in your hand than put people on that moon. You can do this. Okay, I know a lot of you have startups. You can do this, and I'm here rooting for you. I'm easy to find on the internet. Cheryl Conti at gmail.com or Cheryl at dobigthings.com. Thank you so much.
I'm really excited to be here today and to share a little bit about the story of my company, Nihilus, how I got the company off the ground, how we went through a really difficult pivot that could have killed the company but ended up saving it, and how I've managed to grow the company to where we are today at millions of dollars of ARR and into the future. But first, let me tell you a little bit about what Nihilus does. Nihilus is a horizontal API platform that makes it really easy for developers to connect to the data in email, contacts, and calendar. Today, hundreds of companies are using our APIs to build productivity applications that embed communications workflows and things like scheduling so that you can get all of the context you need in one place to get specific jobs done and spend less time hunting down all the context to do your work, and just be really productive. So let's go back in time, back to 2013 when I started the company. I started Nihilus with a friend of mine from MIT. And when we started the company, we called it Inbox. The problem that we were trying to tackle was that email is really hard to work with as a developer. Email's been around for over 50 years, and over the decades, the complexity that's built up over time has made it so difficult to work with that people weren't innovating and building new things that could connect to all the valuable data inside it. So we thought a bit about this problem, and the solution that we came up with was to build an API abstraction layer that could connect to any kind of email account and give modern developers what they expect: JSON and sanitized UTF-8 output. And we also thought about what would be the easiest way for developers to build into this platform. And we plan to not only launch these data APIs, but to also build an email client that was built from the ground up to be extensible, the developers would build rich plugins right into. We raised some seed funding in the fall of 2013, and in January 2014, we rented our first office in the Mission District in San Francisco. It was about the size of a studio apartment, and we called it the Code Cave because it didn't have any windows. But we managed to fit 6 desks and this huge couch from IKEA in it. And we hired a couple friends of ours from MIT, and we got right to work building the product. There's also this air conditioning unit in this windowless studio that would constantly ice up, and it would spit snow down on whoever happened to be working at the desk underneath it, keeping things entertaining. A ton of stuff happened in the first year of that company, 2014. This next slide shows a few of the milestones that we went through as a company that year. The green dots are internal milestones, and the blue dots are external things that happened that we had nothing to do with, that really freaked us out and threw us off, and we actually thought these things would kill the company. So we spent about 6 months building the initial product, and then in June of 2014, Google released a REST API for Gmail, which was really scary to us because we were building a REST API for every email provider out there, and we were worried about the competition. But we took a step back and thought about the big picture and decided that it was worth continuing to make this bet that the universality of what we were building at Nihilus was going to be a big value add, and that also we could build features that the email providers like Google weren't going to build into their direct data APIs. So we could still provide a ton of value to developers. So we went ahead and launched our product first as an open source repo on GitHub. And then in the fall of 2014, we launched our hosted cloud platform. Another thing happened in October of 2014, which was super scary, which was Google released an email client called Inbox, which, as you might remember from previous slides, was actually the same name as the company at that time. So we figured it was going to be really hard to compete with Google for SEO. So we took another step back and were like, okay, what are we going to do? And we ended up just changing the name of the company, and that's how we became known as Nihilus. At the end of the year, we went out and managed to raise an $8 million Series A funding round, pitched on the next step of the company, which was going to be building out that email client. What I want you to take away from all of these events that happened in our first year is that it's really important to be gritty when you're getting a company off the ground. Starting a company involves super high highs, but also low lows. And if you don't stick through the lows and try to see the big picture and identify what things are actually mean your business isn't working and what things just are scary, you're not going to be able to stick with that idea long enough to actually get it off the ground. And we did stick with it, and we ended up launching that email client. It was called Nihilus Mail, and we were super excited about it. We really believed that it was going to be the future of the company, and that we were going to get developers to build all sorts of really awesome plugins directly into our platform based on this email client. Unfortunately, that's not the way it worked out. This email client was a really bad business, and I'm going to dive into some of the reasons why that was, and tell you a bit about how we managed to go back to the data APIs and build that into a successful company. So we had to pivot. And to explain why, I need to dive into a few basics about selling subscription-based software, or SaaS. There's a few key business metrics that you want to look at when you're building a SaaS business. And the big ones are, first off, churn, which is typically measured monthly, which is how many of your customers, or what % of them, cancel their subscriptions every month. Then there's customer acquisition cost, which is how much money your company has to spend in order to obtain a new customer. and usually that means spending money on sales and marketing. There's lifetime value, which is the total amount of money that your company makes off the average customer during the entire time that they are a customer. And then there's net dollar retention, which means if I close $1 of sales for my company today, in 1 year, how much is that account going to be worth to my company? So given that background, why was Nihilist Mail a bad business? What it really came down to was churn. We were able to get hundreds of thousands of developers to download and try out the client, but we couldn't get them to stick around. We were seeing over 80% month-over-month churn. And if your churn is this high, none of those other metrics that I talked about matter at all. We updated this deck, but just roll with it. Imagine the logos. Our competition was the free products that were shipped by the email providers themselves. They were subsidized by their other businesses. Again, we had trouble getting these free users to convert into paying users. And our team was also spread really thin. We had around 15 engineers, and we were essentially trying to build 3 different, very different, complex products. 1, the data APIs. 2, this desktop email client. And 3, examples of the kinds of plugins that we wanted developers to build so we could inspire them to build more. This made it really hard for us to create the kind of quality that we needed and to meet the bar of quality that folks expected from us. So Nihilist Mail didn't end up working out. We had to shift away from it. We actually ended up spinning it off as an open source project and completely stopping working on it about 2.5 years ago. And when we did that, we were able to take a hard look at the Nihilist APIs as a business. And what we found there was that there were a lot of really strong signals that we should double down on the APIs and focus on growing that 100%. With the APIs, we were seeing less than 1% month-over-month churn, which meant that people would build the APIs into the product and essentially never stop using us. We had a customer acquisition cost to lifetime value ratio of 12:1, which is best in class. It means we could expect to put $1 into the business in sales and marketing and turn that dollar into $12 later. Our net dollar retention was 180%, which is also really strong. And this chart here is what's called a cohort analysis graph. And every colored bar in this graph represents a group of customers that joined during a specific period of time, usually a month. As you can see in this chart, in our cohorts, they grow and expand over time because we have a usage-based model where people pay us more money as their own user bases and products grow. This means that we essentially get revenue growth for free. If your cohort analysis chart looks like this, do not wait as long as we did to double down on this business, because graphs that look like this are really unique and represent a really strong business foundation. If you want to learn more about these metrics, I highly recommend you check out this talk by this guy, Brian Balfour, former VP of Growth at HubSpot, called Growth is Good, but Retention is Forever. This was a really tough transition for us as a company. The email client was the passion project of my co-founder, Michael, and as a part of making this transition, he left the company. The way that we got through things was through the strength and cohesion of the team. And I'm really proud of how we all came together and got through a really hard time, which for most companies, when faced with such a big change, they don't make it through, they just die. I'm really grateful for everything that the team did to get through this transition and to get us to where we are today, which is going to the future and focusing on growing. Today, Nihilist has hundreds of customers that are using our platform to power their products, including big names like Hyundai and Move.com. Those strong business metrics still remain true today. And our team has grown to over 50 people with offices in San Francisco, New York, and also, just recently, we opened up a sales office in Denver. Our cohorts keep growing according to our historical trends. And the strategy that we've been using for this growth is one that I like to call land and expand. Because we can expect that customers will grow over time once they start using our product, we're able to focus on bringing as many new businesses onto the platform as possible, because even if they start out at low developer plans, many of them will grow over time to become very large deals. And another thing that's happened as a side effect of focusing our team on only one product is that our customers got way happier. It turns out if you fix their bugs and build new features, people really like your product a lot more because you're providing a better experience. To conclude, it's been an incredible journey to start Nihilist and to get it to where it is today. It's been an incredible learning experience for me that's pushed me in ways that I never expected. And I'm really grateful for everyone who has joined me on this exploration and journey. And I'm really looking forward to where it's going to take us in the future. Thank you.
Learning's there. Important to pivot first, and growth is important, but engagement and retention are critical. And oftentimes that comes from focus. So up next, we have a Seattle-based lawyer, political activist, and founder of a fast-growing venture-backed startup. This is someone who knows a bit about community and about the importance of building spaces that are built and serve women. So I would love to introduce to the stage Amy Nelson, founder and CEO of The Riveter.
It's so good to be here with you this afternoon. My name is Amy Nelson, and I am the founder of The Riveter. We are a modern-day union for working women based out of Seattle. In addition to growing companies, I grow humans. I have 4 daughters, which is very on brand. And I don't know what you did with your summer vacation, but I had a baby. My youngest daughter is 3 months. So I'm a little tired, but I'm here today because it was so important to me to be part of this event and this community. And I want to thank Leanne and everyone at Lesbians Who Tech for building this for all of us, because it's amazing. I am here today to talk to you about raising money. I am not an expert by any means, but I have done it. I have done the thing of raising money. The Riveter is 2 years old, about 28 months to be exact, but who's counting? We launched in Seattle in 2017, and in 2 years, we have raised $21 million to grow the company. We now have 80 employees. We have 10 work and experience spaces across the country, and we have thousands of Riveters, and so it's been quite a ride for the past 2 years. Why I've done it is incredibly important, and I'll tell you about why I've done it, which will become relevant when I tell you how to do it and how to go raise money. Why have I done it? Because women are still screwed in the workplace. We lose still almost half of women after they become mothers from corporate America, which is a stunning number and should really floor all of us. Only 4% of small business loans go to women, and there are still more Fortune 500 CEOs named John than there are women. Seems like we should probably change the ratio just a bit. And to explain the most stunning statistic at all that I think will resonate with all of us in terms of raising money and growing the companies we want to grow, I'd love to ask everybody who can to stand with me just for a moment. You're probably all tired of sitting too, right? A post-lunch lull. Okay, so we'll go through this exercise with me and just humor me for a minute. If everybody, but if the back half of you could sit down. Okay, so the group that's remaining represents the 50% of the American population that are women. Now, if everyone but the front 2 rows could sit down. Okay, so we have about 10% left. The 10% of you represent the 10% of venture capital investors that are women. which is still a stunningly low number. Now, if all but maybe these 4 could sit down. Okay, now we're down to 2%. 2% represents the percentage of venture capital dollars that went to women founders last year. Now, if you could all sit down. So now we look like we're at 0, and we are, because that's the statistic of the amount of venture capital dollars that went to African American women last year. It was 0.0001%, which is nothing. So this is why we're doing it, and this is what we can change. So I would love to share with all of you what I did to raise money so that you can do it too. So how do we disrupt this system? I think there are 7 steps to learning to pitch. So first, you have to decide that you want to do it. And I think that is the paramount one, and we'll go over that. Second, you have to learn to love lists, which is very tactical but incredibly important. Third, you'll master the pre-meeting, which is one of the first meetings about fundraising. Next, you'll write your pitch, which is a really big and important piece of the puzzle. Fifth, you'll get the actual meeting. Sixth, you will conquer the meeting. And seventh, you'll get the deal. How many of you have raised money or would like to raise money for a startup? Great. You got to be sure about it. And I think that's the first step about raising money for a venture capital-backed startup. You have to decide that you're ready and committed to launch an idea. And you have to believe that that idea needs to exist in the world. I built the Riveter as a working mother because I needed it, because I needed a community of women who had started businesses, who'd gone before me, who cared very deeply about where women were in the workplace. And I simply couldn't find it. And when I decided to raise money for that company, I knew I was walking through a one-way door. When I walked through that door and I took other people's money to start my company, I had to say, I will not quit. I promised myself, I promised my family, I promised my friends, I promised my employees and my investors that I am in it on the hard days, and there are so many hard days. And so I think it's really important that you think about it that way in terms of building that kind of company. It's not something you can walk away from. The other thing you have to ask yourself is, am I up for it? Do you have the energy, the drive? I'm sure everyone in this room does, because this is an incredible room of remarkable women and allies. But it's really something you have to think about. I don't sleep a lot. Now it's probably because I had so many kids, which is my own fault. But at the same time, you really have to commit yourself to the energy and the drive and the wherewithal to do this thing. Now, if you believe your idea has to exist in the world and know that you're the one to build it and you're up for it, then step 1 is done. You've made your decision. And I'm a big believer, and you've heard it here today from some of the women that spoke before me, that once you've made that decision, just go. The second part of this is the learning to love lists. This is probably the most boring step to talk about, but I think it's absolutely the most critical. I wish I had known about this when I did it the very first time, because it saved me a lot of time as I raised subsequent rounds. Make a spreadsheet. Go like old-fashioned Excel spreadsheet. I'm an Excel fan. And you can go in there and you write down a list essentially of everybody you know that could either invest, that could introduce you to someone who could potentially invest, or that might have a great network and ideas for you to feed off of as you grow this company. Starting a company is an exercise in relationships. You're going to talk to so many people that you know in so many different capacities. So you make a list and you start to track those relationships really meticulously. If you've ever been in sales, I hadn't. It's sort of like creating a big sales funnel, and that's an amazing place to start from. So these lists will become your kind of money pipeline. So for me, one of the things I did, having no background in tech when I started my company, I was a lawyer for 10 years, is that I went and I scoured tech publications in Seattle where I live. And through that, I identified the names of kind of serial angel investors in my area. I put those names on my spreadsheet, and then I went onto LinkedIn, and I typed the names in, and I found out if I had second or third connections. And it's a very tedious exercise again, but those second or third connections, those middle people, they got me to those angel investors. And eventually, when I did many more steps that we'll go through, those angel investors were the first people that put money into my company. I also talked to everyone in the world about my idea and put them on my list as well. I talked to a parent of another preschooler in my daughter's 2-year-old preschool class about my idea, and she said, oh, you should talk to my husband. He's a serial entrepreneur. So I sat down with him, and he connected me to $200,000 worth of my seed round, which was a very significant part. This is going to take time, but it's, I think, the most critical step to all the next steps when you're fundraising. The next step is to master the pre-meeting. So you don't just sit down with someone and start pitching. Many times you'll have meetings before where you talk about your idea. It's a chance for you to refine your pitch over and over and over again and to nail it and to figure out really what you want to say. And then you ask people out to coffee to practice that pitch. And you sit down, you tell them what you're doing, and then you listen to them because they're going to give you feedback. They're going to tell you what resonates with them. They're going to tell you what doesn't. You can see it in their body language. You write it down and take the feedback. It's all so incredibly important to sharpening your vision of what you want to put into the world. The final piece of that, after the meeting, always follow up. I know we're all so busy, but if somebody gave you time to talk to you about your idea, say thank you. It's just one of those things my mom taught me that I still try to do every day. The next step is writing the pitch. Writing the pitch is super important, obviously, and I think it can be really boiled down into some simple words: the what, the why, and the how. So you have to figure out what you're going to do, why you're going to do it, and how you're going to do it. And that's what you have to tell anybody who could potentially invest in your company. You have to be really organized and write a really tight pitch. People will stop paying attention after a few minutes, so you've got to get it out really quickly. The next step is to get the actual meeting, and that's the pitch meeting. Something I wish someone had told me, and I don't know why they didn't because I talked to a lot of founders, is that when you go out to raise money, treat it like it's your full-time job. That's it, full stop. Because it's really hard, it's emotionally draining because you're going to hear no over and over and over again. Trust me, I've heard it like 100 million times. And you also just need to get in, get it done, and move on to do the thing that you want to do, which is build the company with the fuel that you're given in the investment. So go back to your list and figure out, okay, who am I actually ready to do the official pitch to? And then reach out to those people and say, hey, I've got something more concrete to talk about now. And then you'll have the meeting. Just do meetings upon meetings and stack it all on a calendar and stop doing everything else. And again, like I said with the pre-meetings, remember to always send the thank yous. I think that's incredibly important when people commit to giving you time. The next step is to conquer the meeting. The first thing I will say, because I have seen this happen again and again, because now I do some angel investing, is that if you're going to go to a meeting and set the meeting, be on time for the meeting. Leave yourself plenty of extra time to get to that place. I know that might seem like an obvious, but in a world that we live in where transportation issues happen, sometimes we don't plan enough time. So make sure you get to the meeting, treat it like a job interview because it is in many ways. When you go into the pitch, start paying attention to every single thing that you can about the people you're talking to. How are they reacting? What are they asking questions about? How can you respond? And always anticipate before the meeting the hard questions that you might get. I got so many hard questions, and I started to see a pattern, and so I knew what I had to answer. After every meeting, I would write down the hard questions and figure out the answers. The other thing that will happen, probably, in this room to people like us, because we're women, is that people will have implicit or very explicit bias. There's a reason women only get 2% of VC funding, and it's because people don't quite understand how brilliant we are and how many great ideas that we have. If you come across those issues, and I certainly did, my response was to decide to take it head on. So one time someone asked me at the end of a pitch in the Valley, they said, all right, great idea, like, are you physically up for this? And I was like, what do you mean? And they said, because I always ask people to repeat a question if it's loaded with bias, like hoping they'll figure out that they're being an asshole. Usually they don't, but it's worth a shot. So he said, well, you've just had a baby. You've got 2 other kids, because at the time I had 3 kids. Like, who knows what the hell he would have said now that I have 4. But he said, you've just had a baby. Are you physically up for building a national company? And I looked at him and I said, you know what? I know that this will never happen to you because you're a man, but I built this company while I was pregnant, so physically I can do anything. And I think it's really important that we take the strengths that we have and just put them back in people's faces, because being a woman is an incredible strength and we should own it. Thank you. If you run into trouble in a pitch, one piece of advice: if you get a question that you need a second to answer, repeat the question. Don't say, oh, that's such a great question, and pause, because they'll see through that as bullshit pretty quickly. But repeat the question so you give yourself a second to start figuring out the answer. And then again, if you don't quite know the answer, just say, I'll get back to you on that, rather than making something up. And then do get back to them. It gives you an opportunity and a reason to follow up, which is always great because they might start ignoring you. But always bring someone to take along notes to. That's the final piece of advice I have about going into the actual meeting. I've always taken someone with me. You want to have someone there who can see things you're not seeing, and hopefully someone who can jump in if you're running into trouble. The final step after you've had your amazing pitch meeting is to get the deal. So at this point, you've got a term sheet or you've got someone interested. And then you get to pick the investors. Sometimes I think we always feel like we're on one side of the table, like begging for money. But the thing is, an investor is a partner in your business. They aren't writing you a check. They're coming into the business with you. I talk to my board members almost every day. It's so joyful. It's actually, like, I have great board members. It's really great, but, like, I do talk to them all the time. And so you have to realize that these are people that will be with you for the entire ride of what your company is. So pick your investors. Do diligence on them. Who are their investors? Because if you're a company like The Riveter that cares very deeply about your values, you have to live to those values and pick investors who share the values. And I've definitely turned down checks. Getting funded is a big deal, but it's really just the beginning. The next steps are everything that comes after. And because you've made the decision, because you've walked through that one-way door, you'll be ready to do it. I hope this was helpful to you. I'm always available if you ever have any questions, but I think you should all go out and get funded. And I actually have this course online talking about a lot of the things I went through today with a little bit more of a paced piece, because it's really hard to teach fundraising in 12 minutes. However, I was really happy to come here today and talk to you, and let me know if you have any questions at all. Thank you.
So keep the energy up. In a moment, we'll be rejoined by our hosts, Daniel Moody-Mills and Andrea Mingo. See you in a few.
complete back there. Coffee?
Well done with the coffee. I've
right.
had 3. All right, so it is the most exciting time. It is time for Queer Jeopardy.
Woo!
Round 2 with no drone.
As you know, my drone category was canceled.
Yes. And so for this game, we need 3 contestants to come up. And
Don't all jump
we
at
also
once.
need the screen. Yes.
Now that
Thank
you know the categories.
Now that you know the categories. And they're super good and funny. So, okay.
All right.
Yep.
Yes, we've got one. I just saw.
Did you put your hand up? Correct. Come.
They put their hand up and they're like, me? Really?
2 more.
All right, one more.
Oh.
Right there in the back.
Great.
I see you.
Awesome.
One more.
Do we get one more?
Over there.
Where?
I
Here.
see.
Yes, you. Go.
You.
Come.
Yes,
Is that
you.
3? Fantastic. Oh,
L-word reboot
yes.
was like the trigger.
Okay.
So you're going to stand
So
behind
stand
here.
behind here.
Pick your bell, because you're here first.
What's your name?
Margaret Liu.
Okay, Margaret. Clap for Margaret.
All right, all right.
We have our other 2 contestants coming up. How many of you watched the old L Word?
Oh.
Are you guys excited about the reboot? Yeah. Oh, she said no. I saw the trailer the other day. I'm excited about it. Bet's gonna be mayor. I'm about that power lesbian life. And her suits were to die for.
Okay.
All right. So, grazie.
Me.
Okay, so what is your name?
Audrey.
Audrey.
Julie.
Julie. Okay.
All right.
So the rules again. It is Queer Jeopardy, which means that how do you answer the question? In the form of a question. Good. And you do not answer the question until you
And are
called upon.
called upon.
Okay.
Okay.
Ready? Okay. Pick a number between 1 and 5.
Margaret?
7.
Hold on.
Wait.
We're off to a good start.
That did not go well.
Margaret
That
is
did not
excited. I think
go well.
I vote.
I work for a company called 7 Rooms, so I always just automatically pick the number.
Okay. All right.
Danielle, if you
Okay.
had to make a wager, like if you were to put $10 on who you think is going to blurt out an answer first, who would you say?
Okay, pick a number between 1 and 5. 1. You go first. Okay, so pick a category. And you can see them down here. Look on the screen.
Oh, yeah. Down in front of you, too. For
200.
all right.
Oh, you went big. Okay.
Yeah, we'll go big or go home. She is an art dealer and mom of baby Ella. No.
What is that?
Correct.
Well, but Bet, I would technically be who? I'm still going to give it to you, but that's a person, not a thing.
I don't know about this group, y'all.
200.
What'd
you say?
I don't know.
It's Friday afternoon.
I get it. I get
What
it.
is
I get
nap
it, Audrey.
time?
It's okay.
All right.
Go ahead.
You get to go again.
You get to go again because you won that first round.
Okay, I'll order reboot for 100.
All righty. Oh, my God. I love it.
She can't read my handwriting. That's fine.
She created the chart that everyone orbited.
Julie?
I'm totally blanking on her name. I don't remember.
Margaret.
Who is Alice Piasecki?
Okay.
Yeah!
On the board.
With
On
the last
the board.
name. Come through with the last
I
name.
know. I enjoy the last name. Okay. Pick the next category. You can even look down here.
Oh. Here. I'm going to leave
sorry.
this up here. Go ahead.
L-word reboot for 300, of course.
Of course. Of course. If only drone footage for 300 was still up there. She is the character everybody loves to hate.
Who is Jenny Schechter?
Yes! Yes! I can't stand her.
The worst character.
Oh my
Literally.
God. Even
The
when
worst.
I now fast forward through her parts.
She was, I think, for me, a reason to stop watching. I was so annoyed by her presence.
Didn't she die at the end? Oh, shit, sorry.
Well, maybe she'll be...
The show's been off for like 10 years.
If you guys love the box set. Well, here's the thing. Since you have the inside track on the reboot, did she come back to life?
I hope not. I would kill her myself. I would kill her myself.
Okay.
All right, so...
I'll take Hangover Cures for 300, please.
Great.
Look at me. All
Hangover
right.
Cures for 300.
All right. Pole position. Oh my God.
Okay.
Everyone's getting a lunge over here.
I'm a fencer,
These three ingredients can save your life in the form of a sandwich.
Julie?
Bacon, egg, and cheese.
Yes!
What is?
Well done.
All right. If you're from New Jersey, it's Taylor ham, egg, and cheese.
Thank you for calling it Taylor ham, not pork roll.
Oh, please. It's Taylor ham. Always.
I don't know this inner Jersey circle over here. Okay. Julie?
Hangover cures for 200.
Hangover Cures for 200.
Okay. This is a sports drink that people use for couch sitting, and it was developed by a Florida football coach.
Julie? Correct. This girl knows her hangover cures.
I know. Fast. Okay.
Oh, damn!
Yes, whoever that was. Thank you. Keeping us honest. I got so excited about that one, I forgot.
That was directed at Julie. That wasn't directed at me. I'm not going to take that as shade. I refuse to accept it.
Have you met my co-host? And security guard.
Yes. Okay, Julie? Oh, for 100. Here we go. In the form of a question. This state was the first to legalize marriage.
What is Massachusetts?
I have to tell you. Yes. One of the best parts of doing this hosting at Lesbians Who Tech every year is the competitive nature of our people.
Damn.
It's like literally.
Barbara's going to break the bell.
I love it.
I have to jump in. I'm a fencing world champion, so I am quite competitive.
All right, Margaret. Next question. No,
you gotta pick a question first.
Queer state history for 300, please.
for 300. Okay. This first state to decriminalize sodomy, effectively decriminalizing homosexuality. Oh. Audrey?
What is California?
Incorrect.
Oh, anyone else want to buzz in?
Julie?
What is New York?
Incorrect.
Can we get a lifeline from the audience?
Does anybody know the answer?
I'm sorry, does Alex Trebek provide lifelines? No, Margaret, no. But you can guess because there are several other states that were not mentioned.
I think that was the time right now.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What is Illinois?
Oh, teachable moment.
Teachable moment. I love those.
Okay. So what's left on the board is Hangover Cures for 100
and queer state history for 200.
I don't remember who was choosing.
Me? Nobody got that
I'll
right.
choose.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, there's a leader. Yes.
I like you.
300?
200.
Yeah, state one.
Okay. This state has a queer governor named Governor Kate Brown.
Julie.
Who is, or what is Virginia?
Incorrect.
But thanks for trying.
Audrey.
What is New Hampshire?
Incorrect.
I want to say what is Kansas, but that's not. It's not.
Also
that's not
incorrect.
Which is cool.
Okay.
Okay.
What is
Yes!
Oregon? Oregon.
Oregon.
Okay, the
Okay,
last
last one.
last one.
Hangover cures for 100. A tropical elixir of the gods that speeds hydration.
What is Pedialyte? Oh, what is coconut water?
Okay.
I get tropical punch flavor. I don't know about you.
What? Incorrect.
Coconut water. What is coconut water?
But
No, you don't get the answer twice.
what was it? Wait, what was the second answer?
No one
okay,
heard it.
okay.
Doesn't matter. Audrey?
What is pineapple juice?
Incorrect. Has anybody had a cocktail in this room?
Also interesting answer. You have no idea. What is it?
What is what?
Thank
you.
God. Coconut water is the correct answer.
Maybe that should have been 300.
All right, let's count them up.
All right.
Audrey,
What you got?
500, 200,
Oh, we have a
500.
tie.
We have a tie. Okay, we're going to do a tiebreaker.
Okay.
I'm literally on the spot. I'm making this up.
Do you want to? Good, because remember those trivia questions you asked me yesterday?
Huh?
Remember the trivia questions you asked me yesterday?
Yes.
Those were good.
Do it again?
Well, I think we have a tiebreaker, yeah.
Okay. Pop culture question. What?
Let's do a name that dance move.
Name the rapper.
Or not.
Name the rapper who became Donald Trump's best friend.
Oh, Julie. Oh, God. But I think Julie hit it first.
Julie? Yes!
But I'm not sure if they hit it at the same time. 'Cause
And
I'd like to do
sometimes I
another
would
one.
answer that, what is Kanye West?
What is? Oh, but I do think now we should do one more, which is like a name that dance move, where you have to do a dance
Oh
move.
no,
and they name
we're
it.
not doing that. Julie is the winner.
Okay, Julie won.
Round of applause!
Yay! Hold
We
on,
will get
you win. Hold on. We have a prize for you.
We need to find you
I think
a
we have a
t-shirt,
prize.
so we will get you a t-shirt because we do not have a t-shirt prepared for you at this very moment. Oh, we have a tote!
A casual lesbian, but there's something inside.
Is it a t-shirt?
It's a dance move.
Oh.
It's a t-shirt that you can wear for dance moves when you play at home. Name that dance move.
There you go.
Thank you for
Thank
playing.
you all for playing. Thank you all for playing. Good
All right.
job, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, who's ready to get back to why you came here?
Are you ready for your next speaker?
And those of you who only came for the Jeopardy, you're welcome to leave now.
We will have round 3 in San Francisco.
Stay tuned.
Championships.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Okay.
All right. Let's do a little drum roll action. Let's get ourselves feeling good. Let's bring our next speaker to the stage. Please welcome Ariel Duhaime-Ross. They are the host of the podcast Reset. They're going to explain the science and tech behind the gay gene study. This is going to be good. Let's give a warm welcome.
Welcome.
Everybody doing? So, as mentioned, I am going to talk about the gay gene study. If you remember, it came out a few weeks ago, and what everybody was sort of talking about was the headline, right? There is no single gene that is associated with gayness. That's what all the news outlets reported, and that's one way to look at it. But what I'm going to do today, and my goal, is to help you sort of look at the study the way that I look at these types of studies. So that when your awkward Uncle Bob at the next family gathering goes, hey, remember that study? You can go, actually, let me kind of break it down for you and you can explain it a little bit. So when I look at any kind of scientific study or article about a scientific study, the first thing that I do is look at the news outlet that's writing about this, the reporter that's writing about it, or the scientist that's talking about it. In this case, that person is me. So here are my credentials. I have a bachelor's in zoology. I have a master's in science, health, and environmental reporting. And I have been reporting about science and technology for years now. A few years ago, some of my greatest hits were that I wrote the definitive history of the dental dam, and I reviewed a Kegel exerciser. So that's a thing. You should look it up, actually. The Kegel exerciser was really painful and terrible and awful, so that's a thing. Most recently, I was the climate change and environment correspondent for Vice News Tonight on HBO, which was a hell of a ride, because I've been basically covering the apocalypse for the last 3 years. And now I am the host of a brand new podcast that's launching on October 15th called Reset. I will be covering technology and science, and it's under the Vox Media Recode umbrella, which means that, yes, I have spent a lot of quality time with Kara Swisher this week, and it's been great. Okay, let's talk about the study. Hopefully, by the way, all of these credentials that I have given you have sort of convinced you that it's worth actually listening to the next few minutes. But coming back to the study. So it was a big deal. It was covered all over the world. Lots of news outlets reported on it. And probably the most important reason why they did that was because it was a very large study. There were 470,000 participants, which is a lot for this kind of study. And the participants came from UK Biobank in the UK, 23andMe as well. So it was people from the UK and the US that were included in the study. So it was big. And that should give you some confidence, right? You should be able to turn to your Uncle Bob and say, hey, the study was really big, so they probably did a good job at looking for gay genes. Except that if you framed it that way, you would be framing it wrong. Because, and that has a lot to do with the way that this study was conducted. So the first indication is from the research summary. That first sentence is super blurry, but what it says is that somewhere between 2 and 10% of people report having had a same-sex sexual experience at some point in their life. So that should tell you something right off the bat. The data that was used in this study, they were self-reported pieces of data. So I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but there are quite a few people who, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable admitting publicly that they have had sex with a person of the same gender, right? So that probably should already tell you that there's some underreporting going on. And then if you're looking at the genetics of people, that might actually affect the results. So that's one thing. And the other thing that's really important to know is that the authors, and that's why I'm using this term, by the way, the authors have made a point of talking about same-sex sexual behavior. And that's important because not everybody who's had a same-sex, well, actually, let me back up. That's important because a lot of outlets talked about the gay gene, right? But again, that would be wrong because not everybody who is, who's had sex with a person of the same gender would call themselves queer, bi, or gay, or lesbian. And then the other reason is that not everybody who is queer, bi, or a lesbian, or gay, has had sex, or has had sex with a person of the same gender. So right away, what you have to go think about is, okay, this study didn't actually look at gay genes. What they looked at was sexually active people who've had sex with a person of the same gender and who were willing to admit it. That's what they looked at. That is the whole thing, okay? So when we talk about gay genes, ish, you know, We're also talking about a person who's willing to accept a certain amount of risk, for instance, because they're willing to admit that they've done something that in some parts of the world is not super duper acceptable. So that's a thing. Now the findings. I'm actually going to put this clicker down because this is literally my only slide. So the findings. The most important finding is that the researchers found 5 genetic variants that are, and genetic variants, by the way, are versions of a specific gene. So they found 5 versions of a gene, of 5 different genes that are statistically associated with same-sex sexual behavior. And fun fact, one of them was found in an area that is associated with male pattern baldness. So it might have something to do with hormonal regulation. Another one of those variants was found in a stretch of DNA that has to do with our sense of smell. So that's fun. Cool. But again, there are a few things that you need to think about when you talk about this, because what does it mean? What does it mean that they found these genetic variants? I can tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that these genetic variants cause queerness. That is not the conclusion. The conclusion is that these researchers were able to identify 5 genetic variants that, according to their models, tend to be found in people who will go, yep, I've had sex with a person of the same gender. That's it. That is the only thing that you can say with confidence about this study. And just to be clear, that having these genetic variants doesn't necessarily mean that a person will end up being gay, right? It doesn't mean just because a girl has 1 or more of these variants, it does not mean that that girl will then turn around to her 10 best friends when at the age of 16 at a Catholic all-girls school retreat and tell them that they're queer, like I did. It was really fun. We were in a jungle gym. It was good stuff. Should ask my best friends. I cried. It's a lot. Anyways, they were good about it. So yes, so that is not what that means. All it means is that it's associated. It's an association. It's a correlation. It does not mean causation. The other thing that I think is really important to talk about when we talk about this study is the population, right? I mentioned it at the top. It was people who live in the UK and people who live in the US. That means that anybody who's in South America, people who live in Asia, people who live in Africa, people who live in the Middle East or other parts of Europe, or Canada, I'm Canadian, were not included in the study. That probably means that there isn't that much diversity, and that's a problem across the board. This is not specific to this study, and by the way, I'm not bashing the study. It's just a thing that you need to know when we talk about genetics. Because across the board, genetic studies, broadly, tend to feature folks who live in Western countries. And that's a big problem because it has impacts down the line. Now, this is something that we're just looking at, people who've had sex with people of the same gender. That's, okay, cool. But when we're talking about health studies, that has an impact down the line. So that's worth keeping in mind. The other thing, and the researchers make a point of pointing this out themselves because they actually mentioned that it is a problem with the study, is that they excluded anybody who is intersex, anybody who's trans, anybody who's non-binary, all of those people, not included in this study. That probably also has an impact, right? They hope that down the line, those kinds of studies will happen, but this happens a lot. Because right now, scientists are not very good at incorporating people who have what they would call sort of a minority identity in these kinds of studies. Again, something that's worth knowing. Okay, so I've told you all of these things. I've told you all the reasons why you should be skeptical about these findings and why you should sort of take a second look. Why should you care? I think that there are a few reasons why you should care. One is a sort of dystopian way of looking at things. For a long time, people have theorized that if there is a single gene for gayness, then maybe some parents would want to sort of edit that out, right? Maybe that is a thing that they could do to make sure that their kid isn't queer. This study means that that would be really hard, right? And it's not just those 5 genetic variants. They found other things as well, but the genetic variants, if you're editing something out that has to do with our sense of smell, it could be bad. Yeah, you don't know. So that's probably not going to happen. That's one thing. Another thing that I think is worth thinking about is exactly the reason that I mentioned that some folks were not included in the study, which is that any study that looks at our population and that takes us seriously is a step in the right direction. It's not perfect, but it's something. And then the last thing that I want to point out is that I would say that this study is useful in that it helps us sort of point to something and say, you know what, our identity is not debatable. It is something else that you can use, and you should look at it seriously and critically, always. But it's another thing that you can go and say, you know what, our identity is valid. And that's it for me. I'm Ariel Jim Ross. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm the host of Reset, which launches on October 15th. We will be talking about technology and science, so if you want to hit me up with pitches, please do that. Thank you so much.
Y'all. So I am beyond thrilled to be here today. I know everybody says that, but in my role, I get the honor to go to a lot of conferences, and this one is by far the best. So for y'all that have to do this scene, like, this is a very special event, and I'm just so happy to be here. So before I go into what my philosophy is on scaling teams, I want to tell you why I'm up here even talking about it. So this is my 20th year in tech. And I know that sounds amazing because I look so young and awesome, and I didn't start this when I was born. I used to always say my fake age was 27, but I have an 18-year-old, and they're like, that is so gross. I was like, come on now. But this is my 20th year in technology, and I've been leading teams I was an individual contributor. I started off an engineer, still an engineer at heart, so getting to be the boss is pretty awesome, at least in my opinion, because now I can tell the engineers what to do and be like, I was an engineer, so you have to listen to me. They don't care. They still don't listen to me. But I've probably made every mistake that you could possibly make scaling teams, so I've had that privilege too. And so a little bit about me was, I've been doing the startup game for a while, and being at GitHub, still very, very startup-like, even though we've been acquired. And so this was a new challenge for me of going from this startup kind of scrappy feel, and then going with the money and the backing of a much larger company to be able to still completely keep your culture. So my journey took me from New Relic, if y'all have heard of them. They're an application performance management tool. And I had the luck of joining them very, very early on. And so I was brought in as an early leader, and I scaled out the software support engineering team. When we started, we had 6 engineers doing support. And we were having to triple that team in 6 months to be able to support our user and worldwide customer base. And I was just like, oh shit, how am I going to do this? That's the most growth that I've ever had to do as a leader, starting from scratch. And so I made all the mistakes. Sorry, Lucerni. But I learned a lot during that time. And over that year, we took the support team from 6 to over 60 in roughly like 6 to 9 months. And then we even got even larger, opened a second office in Dublin, and we went global with 24/7 support. Once that challenge was done, they tapped me again and said, hey, you have a background in site engineering. I'm a platform engineer by heart, so DevOps for life, even though I run product now, which is awesome because I'm like, people actually care about my work. That's the difference between DevOps and product. DevOps is like, oh, nobody gives a shit. And product's like, I'm like, now they do. So I went and ran the same kind of challenge. We had a huge data issue. With New Relic being an application performance monitoring company, you're basically DDoSing yourself every second of every day. So scaling your infrastructure and DevOps team was incredibly important. And so all the mistakes I made in support, which they still allowed me to go and be in site engineering, I didn't do. Well, I did some of them, but not all of them. But that doesn't matter. And so the thing that's most important, and what I found about, isn't how you scale your team. It's about your culture. right? This isn't about like, hey, tell me how to hire a whole bunch of people. It's about hiring the right people, hiring like-minded people, hiring people that show up and have the same belief system to you. And so to be able to do it elegantly and really productively, you have to put the culture first. Not the amount of people that you need, but the people that want to be a part of what you're doing. And when we talk about scaling our team and our culture, we always say, culture is sacred, don't F it up. But really, nothing is permanent but change. And so having that foundation about your culture is what you have to start off when you do these things, because nothing is permanent but change. And so it's really about growing your culture and having it go along with you during that journey. Because if you don't focus on that, then your company will not succeed. It may, but it's going to suck, and everybody's going to talk about you on Blind. Everybody's going to be on Twitter being like, it sucks to work here. And then you're going to have trouble hiring. And then once you can't hire, people don't want to buy your product. And y'all know how it all goes. So the things that I've learned, the 3 keystones that I've learned, no matter what kind of organization you are, I've had the honor and once again the privilege, because I think everything that I do, I'm just grateful. And life is amazing. And I feel so lucky to get to be on this journey in technology, is whether you have an in-person office, or a group that you have offices and satellite offices, or even if you've been fully remote. I was at Envision App, which is a New York-based company. We were a design platform, and we had the same challenge, but the extra challenge of growing that company was we were 100% distributed. There are no offices. In fact, the COO and CEO live in Brooklyn, work out of their offices in their little apartments, and we went from 100 to a 1,200-person company in less than 3 years. And that was incredibly challenging, but incredibly awesome. And so at GitHub, where we have roughly 60 to 7% of our workforce being distributed, it doesn't really matter how you are growing your teams, like the locality, but really about how you're going to take that culture with you as you scale. So whether it be semi-distributed, wholly distributed, or in office, I feel like these are the principles that I've learned over and over, or applied over and over, that has kept me on track and kept me successful. So really the first thing is establishing that foundation, right? Really understanding what your principles and values are. When you're in a startup, this is the type of work that, at least I've been in a part of startups where we're like, we'll worry about that later. We don't need a charter. We don't need values. Like, we know who we are. And that's true. Like, when you're a 5-person team, you can just go and talk to each other. But as soon as you hit that trajectory where you go from 5 to 20 to Dunbar's magical number of 150, where your social connections start to loosen, and you don't have that foundation, it is incredibly difficult, and you start hiring and bringing on people that don't meet who you are and how you want to show up. So I always tell teams, start with the basics. Take time. Don't just go hire people willy-nilly. Go and understand what you want to be and what you want to accomplish. And then onboarding and training. I mean, it seems like, duh, why wouldn't you do that? But onboarding and training, not on the situational stuff, but the foundational stuff. Think about how you are going to bring people on. And then again, pairing and feedback to keep it ongoing and living. But let's get into it, right? So a lot of times when you're growing your team out, the first day of work, everybody feels like Homer. I feel like Homer most of the time. What did you say? Huh? And so when you think about establishing that foundation, really dissect what is something that's core to our belief system? What can be not changed but grown, and disassociate that from the situational pieces. An example would be, you define your values, you hold them true, you may add to them, but they don't really ever change dramatically unless you're changing industry. But it's easy to get caught up in the situational piece and say, well, this is important. Situational being, we do daily stand-ups at 9 p.m. on Friday because we have a global company, right? Well, that doesn't matter when you're trying to lay your culture out. So laying down the foundational pieces are key to being successful and establishing how we work out of the gate. I see a lot of problems when you show up to a new team and you're like, how do I work with product? What is QA supposed to do? Who are we? When you think about the foundational pieces, how you work is one of those key pieces on setting people up for success, because there are no questions. In the absence of information, people write their own narratives. And humans evolved to be paranoid and scared, and so having these things be true and be laws are important. And then finally, applying a growth mindset. being flexible, being able to say, this is working, but going on. And once again, having that be a place where you hold that foundational piece. When I visualize it, I think about, your values as a pyramid, and that's the baseline. You build up from it. But just because you covered all these things in your culture, it doesn't mean people learned it. It has to be a continuation. If you don't constantly think about how you're impacting your company, your business, your team, people are going to forget. And then once again, especially in a distributed company, we start writing our own narratives. We start going like, oh, what am I doing? Why am I here? This is stressful, especially in startups and just in technology in general. We are working at the speed of light. We are working at the heartbeat of the world to produce digital products or to produce even manufactured products. That was an amazing talk on manufactured products. I just learned so much. But people want it now. So when you're moving fast, it's easy to lose sight of your culture because you're like, grow, grow, grow. So this is where we talk about onboarding and training. Invest in it. Even if you're, once again, a 5, 100, a 200, and this is a thing that you continuously learn applying that growth mindset. And really, the culture starts with recruiting. And this is why foundational value pieces are so incredibly important. Before anybody shows up to be on your team, they should already know who you are and what you care about and how you show up. If they don't, first of all, either they didn't do their homework, you probably shouldn't hire them, or you didn't do your work and really say, we want you to be a part of this team, and this is who we are. Does this meet you? Because we want people that aren't like-minded, but share the same value proposition, that care about what they do and hold those values and those belief systems. Onboarding should be living, too, because what worked for a team of 10 will not work if you have an M&A. When you're onboarding 90 people at once, you may have to apply new tips and tricks and techniques to hold the culture true, right? You may not have the opportunity to be able to say, okay, I'm going to put you through our D&I culture review one by one when you have to onboard a company and one swift. So you have to think about how, as we get to those larger numbers, we produce living onboarding that still holds true, once again, to those foundational pieces. What are our values and how do we show up and who we are? And then this is my favorite, because this one is just so incredibly important. Documentation. Establish a written culture. So what does that mean? It means writing shit down. Seriously, there's so much tribal knowledge in tech. There's so much that's cool, it's in my head. And I'm a developer, I've worked with developers. We write stuff down in comments. I over-comment. Most of my code is comments. I'm sorry. This is why they don't let me code anymore. They're like, you wrote 300 lines. I was like, and 200 of them were comments. That start off, I think this works, but I wouldn't change it if I was you. And then they're like, get out of here and go tell somebody what to do. But honestly, establish a written culture. At GitHub, we eat this up. If y'all don't know what GitHub is, we are the home for all developers. Well, I think we are, but we are an open source platform to host all of the world's open source repository. Open source code repository to share and host. And we utilize repos so much. My life lives in a repo. My life story's in a repo. I do one-on-ones in repos. But it's establishing that written culture. And so I just can't talk to you enough about that, because just coming back to that earlier point, in the absence of information, people write their own narrative, and it's usually a sucky narrative. I'm an optimist, so mine's usually very positive, and everybody's like, no, life is horrible. And I'm like, life is wonderful. So don't make people feel that way. FUD is real. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt exists, especially when you're new to a company, especially when that team has taken on 5 new people. Think about them, empathize with them, write it down. But that's not all, right? I would have put beer and burritos, but I couldn't find a picture of that. And I'm trying to get healthy, so I'm drinking wine, which makes total sense. I was like, I'll just switch to wine. But the buddy system, right? You can't have beer and burritos. You can't have burritos by themselves without beer. I mean, you could, but it's a lot better with it. Establish a buddy system, because they're going to be the cultural shepherds to your team. They are going to show the noobs what's up. They are going to be the ones saying, don't worry about it, I got you. And I don't care what level of seniority those people are, right? When we're talking about engineers, I don't care if it's a principal engineer, a distinguished engineer, a fellow engineer, which I don't like using fellow, so I'm going to say the opposite of that, distinguished, Fellow just seems like a dude. But establish the buddy system, right? And that's where you're going to take somebody along the journey. We like to take it for granted that we're like, oh, this person's super seasoned, or we hired a whole bunch of senior engineers. They're humans. They have imposter syndrome. They're insecure. You know, I still get insecure. I show up to a new job. I'm like, why am I here? Why did they hire me? I don't know how to pattern match, clearly. But then I tell myself, you know what? I'm a badass, and I have my partners and my colleagues to help me be a badass. And so a buddy system is what's going to hold that culture true and do it. For engineers, pair programming. I come back to the buddy system. I don't care if you're a distinguished engineer. You are going to pair program. You are going to learn the systems because everybody has their own way, right? I mean, you should see my Vim setup. You'd be like, that is way too much energy. And I'm like, I know, it's awesome. But thinking about these things and doing it is a part of your culture. It sets the stage to what your expectations are, that we are here to lean on each other, to grow each other, to be force multipliers. So pair programming is one of those ways that you're going to help instill your culture. It could be with their buddy. It could be with anybody, but you should always think about pair programming. It makes everybody better. And then finally, one-on-one and consistent feedback loop. You know, some managers go through, okay, I'm going to do a one-on-one, and it's typically a status update. It's like, what'd you do this week? You're like, I shipped some awesome stuff. Cool, when's it going to be done? In a week. That's not a one-on-one. A one-on-one is to see how they're doing, to see if you do need to make adjustments to your culture, to see if your onboarding's working, to see if your values still hold true, because it always changes. Nothing in life is constant. And those one-on-ones should not be status updates. They should be about the person, and especially in that first 90 days when you have an opportunity to set the stage for the next 120, because if you're in a state of rapid growth, you want to constantly care and feed it. And then having that feedback loop, being open, authentic, transparent, allowing them to be real with you. If you can't do that, you probably should find a new company. That's my opinion. Because really, growing a company is about growing your culture. And your culture should be sacred and true, but it should be alive because you always want to be better. The best leaders are insecure leaders, in my opinion, because we never think we have done good enough. I fall into this bucket. I'm sure a lot of y'all relate to this. You sit down and your friends and family are saying, look at what you accomplished. And you say, wow, I don't know how I did it. You know what? You earned it. You worked for it. You did it. And you know, though, that little voice in your head allows you to continue to grow and change. Don't always shut it off, but listen to it and reinforce that you're good enough, but continue to change and grow. Because the secret of change is to focus not all your energy on fighting what you can't control. It's about growing on the new. But you can't do that unless you have a culture that embraces that. And cultures are what makes and breaks company. And so whether you're growing your team from 0 to 100 or 1 billion, because one day we might be at that place, Amazon, I meant no. Ooh, can I say that? I did. Whatever. I don't work for them yet. You know, just remember those foundational pieces. Now, I know I'm not going to take questions, but I'm around, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
I'm like sad, but I'm also like real tired. Real tired. I'm ready. I haven't slept in like 2 months. Not that I will be doing much sleeping basically for the rest of my life, but that's cool. It's totally worth it, right? Right, worth it. All right, let's do another high five. Turn to your neighbor, give him a high five. Get the energy up. Yeah. This person's like still on their phone and they're like, nah, I'm done with the high fives. It's over for me. I'm going to find you later. She doesn't even know I'm looking at her. All right, so I know we talk a lot. It makes me so happy how much you love the high fives. It's like the amount of smiles that happen. I wanted to give Gloria a high five on stage, but I was like a little like, I don't know. Is this sort of like... We high five later in private, though. It's fine. And it was awesome. So we talk a lot about community. We talk a lot about showing up. We talk a lot about squad. And one of the things we've been thinking about is how to acknowledge the companies that support us in an authentic way, right? And what do we want to reflect back that's important. And for us, one of the things that we've been thinking about for the last couple of years is how important it is for companies to show up for their queer women, LGBTQ folks, and non-binary folks. Am I right? Am I right? Raise your hand if your company supported you being here. That is amazing. That is amazing. And that, we have to keep pushing that. So we decided to have the first ever Company Squad Awards. And so it's real simple. Basically what that means, who is the company that showed up for their queer women and non-binary folks the most by the number of people that they supported to attend here. So we have 3 finalists, and I'm going to ask the people from each of those companies, number 3 and number 2, I'm going to ask you to stand up. We're going to give you a round of applause. And then I'm going to ask the number 1 company to come on stage and take a little group photo with us. And this is the first time we're doing this, but this is going to be a tradition that kicks off right here. So we'll do this every summit. All right, number 3, Facebook Oculus. Can you stand? Stand. All right, clearly, stay standing. Because now this is where I do like a little bit of shaming. I'm like, clearly they sent way more people than are standing right now. So y'all went home or you're drinking on the rooftop, but that's cool. You still sent a lot of people to come here, so thank you. You can sit down. All right, number 2, FactSet. Can we get a photo of them in the stand? Thank you. You guys can sit down. Not gonna lie, Facebook Oculus, they made you look a little bad. All right. The number 1 company, could we get a little drum roll here? This is also, I want to say, this is the company that was our first ever sponsor, and that is probably not a surprise to you all, that is Google. So let's give them a round of applause. Can we get a little music?
I am a diehard Delta girl, and I told DeLovely that I was going to tell you all my Delta status from my trekking back and forth to San Francisco because they have the best flight. But I actually looked. I don't really think I have status anymore. I think I used all my points. So Anyway. But I am so excited to introduce from Delta Airlines DeLovely Gibson. She is the PMO lead, and she's going to talk to us engaging and inspiring disenfranchised teams. Please give a warm welcome to DeLovely.
Okay? Okay, they fiddled with this damn thing, and I was like, I'm gonna get out there, and it's gonna be like. So what I do at Delta is I'm a PMO lead. My credibility in this area is I've been a people manager for about 20 years. So I want to talk to you and give you some stories about how you really engage those teams that are disenfranchised. For the last 36 hours, you guys have been talking about technology, pace, speed, and frankly, there are teams out there that are going to get left behind and pushed to the side because you guys are doing some awesome shit. So essentially, what is disenfranchised? So we may think about disenfranchised when we think about voting, when we think about how in my state of Georgia, votes were tossed in the garbage and Stacey didn't get her just due, that type of disenfranchised. I'm not bitter. But yeah, I lied, right? I lied. So when it comes to teams, disenfranchised teams are the teams that where you've changed things, you've moved their cheese without them having a say. Now they work for this guy, this woman, they're on this floor, you've changed the technology, you know, you put them in the basement, they got to work from home, or they got to drive 50 miles. So you've made all of these changes, and they're just like, F you, like, whatever. I really just don't care. But you as a lead, you're like, I got a team, we got to drive, we got to do these things. And sometimes we forget that these are people. These are like real people. We use words like team and organization and like squad. But we forget that's Jenny, that's Ralph, that's Mary. And we have to make sure that we take that time to go back to the people and make sure that their needs are met, to make sure they could still perform day in and day out, and really make sure that they're pushing the company's goals, making you look good, aspiring to their professional goals as well. Anybody remember this from like psychology or sociology? Maslow's pyramid? So this is something that I get out every now and then because I'm one of those bosses and managers that I'm like heads down. I'm like, you get in the door, here's your stuff. Like, if you don't blow the whistle, your ass will be drowning because I don't have time to micromanage you. I hired you to be a rock star. I'm expecting you to tell me when you need my help. But sometimes you have to pause and really take stock and make sure you ask these questions of your rock stars. Like, we know that when they come in the door, they need that laptop. They need those just basic physiological needs. I need a space. I need a phone. Has anybody started a job and had all that shit on day one? Yeah, right, yeah, see, no hands, like no hands, none. The last time, actually, when I started at Delta, I had all that stuff. I bought the guy who was responsible a bottle of scotch. I was like, this never happens, because you come in and you're floundering around, you're by a printer, you don't have a phone, you just start off mad as hell. Like, damn, they hired me and I don't have what I need. Then, safety needs. Like, do I have a place to put my bag? You know, do I have a place to put my car and it's not in a sketch area? Like just basic safety things you don't think about when you're at the workplace. Love and belonging. Not everybody at work is like you. So you'll have those people that like, oh girl, she has those cool shoes. I'm gonna talk to her. Oh, her jackets are bad. We're gonna have a lot of conversation. But then you have somebody over here who's like quiet, kept to themselves. You know, maybe they're like the one young person or the one older person on your team. Making sure that they feel connected, that you bring them into that inner circle. Esteem. Are you taking the time to say, good job? Because I know me, I'm just like handing shit to you, like do this, get this done. Oh, that's so great, thank you so much. But when do you really pause and say, you're killing it. You're really, really killing it. There's a lot of Fridays, we get to the end of the week, and you're just like, I'm ready to go home. But take that time to say, guys, you did a really, really great job. And then being your best self. So sometimes it's a miss because we get to work. I don't know about you. I get to be my whole self at work. I just assume everybody feels like they can just do their, you know, be themselves. But sometimes you have to have that conversation and be vulnerable and say, hey, you know what? My wife says I need to get some chicken on the way home. So just opening that dialogue that if you're different like me, we can have that conversation. Or, you know, yeah, when I came in, I realized there's not a lot of black people in leadership as well. So, you know, make sure that you feel like you can have that conversation with me. Sometimes we just make those assumptions that people feel like they can be their best selves, but sometimes you need to be that bridge and open the door for the conversation for them to be their best self. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that I've had to be vulnerable at work. So that's me. That's my alter ego, DJ D-Love. I got to a team that literally had gone through a huge transformation. They brought in a new leader. They fired everybody. I get there, I'm just happy to be there. I'm like, oh, I just love coming to this company. I'm in this director role. I'm going to build this fabulous team. And there's like the level, you're going to be in charge of employee engagement. I was like, okay, great. That's so much fun. I find out that our employee engagement scores are 60, like D. So I'm all like, what do we got to do? I start talking to the employees. The leaders don't have conversations with us. They haven't built relationships with us. You know, there's no growth opportunity. So over months, we start putting together a plan, like a plan that has actionable steps and some metrics around it. The company had something they called Spirit Day. My first Spirit Day with this team, we sat on the side, like literally like this, like the Bad News Bears, while everybody had a great time. Like, it was so sad. So after a year, we now are participating. I got the VPs involved. I got the SVP involved. We put together a whole skit. I mean, my SVP at the time was a very conservative, well-kept Brit woman who, you know, was like, good morning, not really a lot of chit-chat. And here in the South, it's like, morning, y'all, how y'all doing? You know, and she just wasn't that person. But I was like, you're going to have to get engaged. You're going to really have to be part of this process for this team's scores to get up there. So we did. We got out there. My thing is, if I'm going to have to ask people to be silly and get engaged, I got to dress up and walk around with this craziness, and my wife's out here some way. This is not how I like to walk around. You know, this is not my style. But I was like, I'm going to get into it. I'm going to show people that we can be vulnerable together, that we can change our scores, and that we can be engaged. And that's really what's important. And if you don't walk away with anything else, the power of vulnerability, I don't know if you guys know Brene Brown. Anybody? That's my girl right there. If you know anything about being a leader, great leaders can be vulnerable. They can show that I'm not perfect. They can show that I can be a little silly. They could show that, you know what, I totally fucked up. I totally just did that all wrong. True story. I'm on my way to this conference. I'm at the office, like I'm a closing keynote, talking about teams, it's gonna be great. I'm thinking I'm just the badass that I am. I'm in a finance meeting with my assistant. We get in the elevator and she says, yeah, I'm gonna go talk to JM about other opportunities. That's what she said. What I heard was, I'm gonna go talk to your boss because I don't like to work for you anymore. Like literally, that's how exactly I interpreted it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to this conference and my own assistant doesn't want to work with me anymore. How jacked up is that? I went home, I'm like, oh my God, babe, you know, this is so terrible. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I feel like a complete fraud. So I had to get myself in check, had to relax. Next day, I'm at the airport trying to get here, and I'm like, Lovely, what are you talking about? You know this. This is your time to get engaged. Don't smooth this out. Don't try to ignore it. Don't freak out. What she said was, I'm going to go talk to JM about some other opportunities. So let's find out what that is. So I'm calling her from the airport, like really, like in the Hartsfield, calling her like over and over again. She's not even answering her phone. I'm like feeling like a needy chick right now. I'm like, I need you to answer this phone. I can't go to this conference and you haven't talked to me. I'm like texting her with these freaking nails like, you've got to get. So she calls me back. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. If you're a leader and you don't know how to say that, you need to just go back home right now. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm so sorry. when you said that to me in the elevator, I was kind of like, just a little, shocked there. It caught me off guard, and I should have responded to you because I was just like, yeah, okay, yeah. So she was like, oh, first of all, DeLovely, I thought about it too. I realized how that probably sounded to you. And I was like, yeah, I was like, I thought we were cool, I've been like building, she's been there like 3 months. So she was like, no, I just really wanted to make sure that she knows that I don't want to be a contractor anymore. She knows that I want to be a full-time employee. And I said, duh. I said, first of all, let me just tell you and be more transparent. I have been talking about this with my boss since I got there. Every time I have this conversation, I'm talking about you. She was like, oh my God. So shame on me for not making sure that I had that conversation. Sometimes as leaders, we're having these conversations trying to build people up, and we're not even including them. We're not even making sure that they know that I'm trying to build you up. I'm trying to make sure I'm taking care of you, but I had never shared that. So we went on to have more conversation, and I said, you know what? I want to do more to make sure that when you have that conversation, and see, I'm one of those people. Like, I'm not going to go, wait, no, let me go talk to my boss first. Are you one of those people? Let me go prime the brakes. No. When you go have that conversation, how can I support you? How can I make sure that your message comes through when I have my conversation? Because this person is essentially going over me to have this conversation, but she knows that's where the keys of the kingdom is. She knows that I can't control her FTE status, right? Because we'd had that conversation when she started. So she was like, oh my God, that's so great. I said, I want to make sure I put you in front of the right people, the right teams, so they see your skill set, so they know other things that you can do. So when those roles open up, we can have those conversations. She's like, this is why we work so well together. And I was like, whew, oh my God, I was about to be a total fraud on this stage. I'm so glad this worked out. But first of all, I'm not perfect. You won't be perfect either. But when those opportunities present themselves, don't miss them. We can rest on our laurels and be like, I'm a good manager. I'm a good leader. But I was really like, I'm just sweep this under the carpet. But then, just something in my spirit said I need to go back and have this conversation, which I'm very glad I did. So go back to your teams. Open those doors. Open that dialogue. And make sure they're aware that you're rooting for them. Sometimes when we're disenfranchised, we just believe that everybody's given up on us. Thanks.
I'll be there. All right, folks. Coming up next to the stage, we have Debbie Ferguson, who's the engineering director at Google. Their talk is Vision, a Disciplined Approach. Round of applause.
I'm an engineering director at Google. Are we all ready to finish strong? Come on, let's finish strong. All right, here we go. We're going to start out with a period of reflection. I want you to think about a project you've worked on, hopefully a big one that was maybe multi-year. Ask yourself, was it a success or failure? Or maybe it was something that was in between those. And then I want you to think about, maybe come up with in your head, 1 or 2 reasons that you think that outcome might have occurred. I've been in industry for over 30 years. I've worked on projects that have gone on to touch billions of people across the planet. And I've worked on products that have failed to even reach 10 people before they were canceled. I've worked at companies that have, such as Google. I was there in the earliest days through 100,000 employees. And I've been at companies that failed miserably and are lost and no one would even remember the name. A few years ago, I was thinking about, is there some way I could predict which ones would be successful and which ones would fail so that I could avoid the failures because they're a bit less fun and maximize my remaining time in my career on the things that had a high chance of success. And what I want to share with you today are two things that I found were always there and present in the successes and resulted in me applying a few questions that I always walk through before I accept any type of opportunity. As I go through this, I'd like you to think about the project we just talked about, you were just thinking about here, and see if it applies, if it's useful. If it's not, tell me. If it is, tell me afterwards to boost my confidence. If it's not, just don't tell me. Write a post or something. The first thing, and it's really, maybe it seems kind of obvious, is that you have to work in a space where there's a great opportunity. I point this out because when I look back, I found that many times I ended up in a place where there wasn't a lot of opportunity. I was focused maybe on increasing my salary by a little bit, or I was focused on career development. I wasn't looking at the larger space and what the true potential was. From that, I decided that I will always apply 4 questions before I go into any type of opportunity. The first question is, I have to imagine some greater potential than what exists currently. I like this question because if I pick places like that, the opportunity for growth is a lot greater than one that is stagnant or not growing or even shrinking. The second thing is, when I go to look at the team or the place that I'll be working, I ask myself, is the capability there? Or could it be there? If it's not there already, I try to imagine, could I bring it there? Is there some skill that I possess that perhaps might make this team more successful? Even if that's true, there's a great opportunity and the capability is there. A last question I ask is, does the organization have the will to see it through? Big opportunities take lots of effort. I've been at companies where their very existence is threatened, but the change is so great that they lack the will to change the way they do things today. So if the will isn't there, I don't go there because it will result in many years, a lot of effort that doesn't go anywhere. If all of that is true, then the last thing that I do is I check to see if I'm interested. If I'm not interested, I bail because a lot of work is going to have to go into seeing something that's transformational. And if I'm not willing to put in the work, I shouldn't start, no matter how appealing it is. Okay, let's suppose you have there's great potential. The next thing I want to see, or what needs to be brought, is that the team has to have a shared, bold vision. When I say vision, I'm talking about what does the future state look like when the mission of that team is realized. This vision needs to be something that, if done properly, is it's clear. You can articulate it in detail. Perhaps it looks like a press release that's written about what the future will be, or something like this. More importantly, it has to be bold. It has to stretch what's possible. It has to be exciting. If it's not exciting, if it doesn't scare you a little bit, then you may be talking about a milestone and not a vision. Bold has to be there, or else the team will not be inspired and you won't go make the type of progress you can. It's also a little bit scary, to be honest, to go after a bold vision. I spent a lot of time in my career putting together bold visions and missed what I realized when I was looking back was perhaps the most important piece. It has to be shared. This is actually, I think, the hardest piece of those 3 statements. It turns out when I get to teams often, they have many visions. Like you can talk to any individual on the team and they have their own vision about where it's going. But the result is, if it's not shared, is you end up with dissonance, disagreement. You go one way for a little while, then someone else comes in and you go another way. And so I began to think about, how is it that you can ensure that a vision is shared, a bold vision is shared? I ended up having the opportunity to work a little bit with Adam Grant at Harvard. And in my conversations with him, I realized something. The key to a shared bold vision is actually mostly about effective group decision making. It's less about the vision and more about this at peace. What has to be present for a group to be effective? I'm going to simplify, since we only have a short period of time, and say two things. The first is you have to have a healthy team. If you don't have a team that is diversity, if you don't have a team that trusts each other or can trust each other, and if you don't have a team that's committed to the cause, you're probably going to struggle to make effective decisions. I want to particularly highlight diverse. Diversity in a team, actually in the early stages, can make the decision-making a little more difficult, but they will make better decisions. It's been shown in research, you've seen it. And so I tend to stay away or rebuild teams that are homogeneous because they're not going to arrive at the best possible results. If all of that is there, then we can actually get into the process of effective group decision-making. And there are three things that need to be clear. The first is you need to know what decision you're making. If you have a group and they're making all different decisions, it's not going to turn out so well. You end up with all different answers. The second and most important thing is you need to be operating with a shared set of facts. What I mean here, this is not unlike the way a jury works. A jury starts with a common set of facts before they ever talk to each other. In business and in public life, often what you see is people expressing opinions before they ever even know all the facts. It's certainly a lot easier, but what you end up with is disagreements. You end up in a win-lose situation where I've put my opinion out there and no one's taking my opinion, so this sucks. This group is all wrong. And so then someone will step in and say, okay, I don't care what y'all's thinking. This is the decision we're making. That's where we're going. That's our shared vision. Everyone buy in. And that doesn't really happen. People might tell the boss, it's cool, but they're off doing something else. So you have to start out with a foundation of shared facts. And then finally, you've got to make sure there's room for every single person to contribute. If not, there's no value in having a diverse team, right? You don't want to get these out of order either. You don't start out by contributing before you go and do the facts. All right. How do we apply this to a setting a vision? Because the decision we're going to make here is setting a vision. About a year ago, I rejoined Google. I was at Google from 2004 to 2008, left for 10 years, and came back last year. I joined a team that I met my earlier criteria about huge potential. I believe there to be huge potential. And yet, when I looked at the state of the current team, they were working on small individual projects that weren't really adding up to a single thing. If you talk to individual people, it was a bit that like they were somewhat demotivated. So I set about taking them through a process, a group decision-making process, and arriving at a vision. The first three steps here, what problem do we solve? Like, why are we even doing this at all? What do we know about the current state? Like, what's the situation? What assumptions are we making? What's the marketplace look like? What are current economic trends? Whatever might affect this space. And what are our strengths and weaknesses? What are our advantages and disadvantages? Are all really about getting to shared facts. The way we would do this, let's take problem, for example, is I would get a large group of people together. There were over, 50 people involved in this project to some degree. Put them all in a room, and we just started brainstorming on what are the key problems to solve. Once we had a large list, a smaller group got together and refined that into what are the themes, what are the things that are reoccurring, what are the patterns, came back to the larger group with a document that was put out for comment. Here's what we think everyone is saying. People commented on, and it was refined into a final result. We repeated that process through each of these 4 steps. What happens when you do that is by the end, every single person can see pieces of their contribution in the final vision. Because you were there when the large brainstorm occurred, you saw how it got refined, you had a chance to get feedback, like I think you missed something, and then you finally saw what the final step was before you went to the next phase, right? So once we had the shared facts, once we got through 1, 2, and 3, which took 3 or 4 weeks, we finally got to brainstorming solutions. This step tends to be the one that everyone likes. It's the most fun. And the more fact-free it is, the more you can be crazy and do things that will actually make no difference in the world, but is really, really fun to do. But once you get there and you have shared facts, something crazy happens. Everyone there is operating from a similar plane. We still have our diversity of views, but we are all starting with a shared understanding of what we're trying to do. And the outcome in this case was that we ended up going on to build around a singular product, a significant product. It ended up spreading across to 2 other sites within Google who are now involved, and we're all working towards one common goal. And it was nothing more than working on these 4 steps right here. And so I've applied these multiple times. I've taught a class on it, and it seems to work pretty well. I'm sure there are other ways, but it's not bad to start, and it's something I'm going to keep using. So, just to summarize, the things that you want to make sure are there. A good checklist that I have found for myself is there should be great potential. You need to have the right team that's trusting each other. You need to come together around a shared bold vision, and you need to develop that intentionally. And that's all you need to have greatly increase your odds of success. Thank you.
Want you to know that we are so thankful you're here, and we want you to thank all of the volunteers, all of the people who make this event possible.
Every single person, a round of applause. All of the crew that's been working behind you. All the Lesbians Who Tech staff.
Every single one of you who has gone to your boss, somebody at work, and said, can you sponsor me to come here? Every company that has sponsored this event, we are so thankful.
So what do we have after this, Andrea?
A gathering, shall we say, a small soiree for a couple of hours, get together.
A small soiree, a salon, a party.
Yeah, get together,
gather with folks and hang out in the press lounge on the rooftop of the Kim Tim.
That's right. Book your tickets for Lesbians Who Tech San Francisco.
But more importantly, I need you guys to do us a favor. Can you stand up? And I need the house lights on. I need a selfie. So everybody squeeze in.
Ah.
Now let's see how many people. Oh, good, good, good. Now everyone group in. Okay.
Oh, yay!
Okay, and now.
Hey, we can only see you.
Oh, well, okay, here. Leanne Duck. Okay, there we go. There we go. Everybody's in it. 1, 2, 3, say lesbians!
Lesbians!
Cute.
Okay. And wait, before anything happens, to stop.
All right, Leanne. Come here.
You can't just like sneak off the stage with your fanny
pack.
pack.
The next time you will see her, we will have a little bundle. So clap for Leanne and wish her love.
Thank you, Leanne, for this world.
And give it up for yourselves. Thank you guys so much for making New York fantastic.
And thank you for being the most fantastic queer people and people who love us in the tech industry.
Have a fantastic weekend.